For millennia, beneath the lifeless sands of a world long forsaken by time, something waited. The planet Velar, once vibrant, had become a graveyard, its skies silent, its ground cracked and sunless. Beneath that scorched surface, buried deep under black stone and ancient warnings, stood a pyramid darker than night itself. Not constructed by any modern species, not even documented by the oldest archivist of the Galactic Senate, it had always been there. Its angles defied physics. Its walls were etched with symbols no one could translate. And in the heart of that structure, locked within a chamber shielded by forces stronger than any known energy barrier, pulsed a relic. It was not a weapon. It was not a machine. It was a piece of living armor, liquid metal that shimmered between states, rippling like water yet firm like obsidian. It beat faintly, like a second heart, radiating a presence that made even the most aggressive species feel unwelcome. Those who sought it had tried everything: brute force, diplomacy, science, even sacrifice. But the armor rejected them all. The Sarnak warlords sent 10,000 soldiers with siege walkers and plasma drills. None returned. The Zyron scholars tried genetic mimicry, splicing DNA from over 50 alien species into cloned vessels. The armor remained inert. The legend began to grow. Not a tale of conquest, but of waiting. Some believed it sought only one form, one soul, one anomaly. Others whispered ancient words, preserved on forgotten walls. The true flame shall wear the shell of silence. The one who should not be, shall be. None understood what it meant. Most stopped trying. Until a human came. Jackson Riley wasn't a warrior. He wasn't a pilot of renown, a strategist, or even a scientist. He was a scavenger, part of a fringe crew drifting through decaying systems, salvaging technology to sell to colonies or fence to Earth corporations that could still afford curiosity. His ship, a rusting surveyor model with mismatched panels and patched thrusters, broke down near Velar. His fuel was gone. Navigation offline. And so, desperate, he descended. The pyramid greeted him with silence. No weapons fired. No alarms screamed. No warnings triggered. He stepped through forgotten halls covered in glowing glyphs, his flashlight bouncing off surfaces that shimmered with internal light. Murals lined the walls, depictions of beings wrapped in armor, standing against voidborn horrors with no faces and too many limbs. He didn't understand it. He didn't need to. All he saw was the gleam of something valuable. Technology. Then, in the central chamber, raised on a monolithic platform floating above a pool of fluid light, he saw it. The armor. It pulsed once. Just once. He should have turned back. Instead, he stepped closer. A tendril of metal moved, slow and curious. Not hostile. Not welcoming. Just aware. Jackson raised his hand and touched it. The armor reacted instantly. No explosion. No pain. Just warmth. Like liquid silk, it wrapped around him, encasing his legs, arms, chest, sealing over his head with a hiss of pressure. He gasped, but not in fear. He could breathe easier, see clearer, think faster. He felt aligned, like a piece of something finally in its rightful place. And then, in his mind, not spoken, but known, a word formed. Accepted. Across the galaxy, ancient sensors blinked to life. Silent satellites that hadn't powered on in 6,000 years began broadcasting. Red lights pulsed in forgotten corners of old command centers. And deep within the Galactic Senate, where the leaders of thousands of species bickered in bureaucracy and complacency, a red alert sounded, one not seen since the last silence. The armor had chosen. The council was thrown into chaos. The word spread fast. The armor. The armor. Active. Warn. But when they asked what species had triggered it, when the answer came, silence followed. Human. Then laughter. Then panic. Old fears surged back. The humans, still young in galactic terms, had been dismissed as unpredictable but manageable, primitive, emotional, fragile. Now, one of them had activated the relic. Talrath Prime, an ancient being of coalescent gravity and cold stone. Rose. If the armor has truly chosen a human, he said in a voice that could strip steel, then the great silence is coming again. And this time, we are not ready. Back on Velar, Jackson stumbled out of the pyramid, heart pounding, the armor glowing faintly with every breath he took. The desert sky above looked different now, darker somehow. The stars sharper. The ground beneath his feet vibrated with awareness. The world had awoken with him. His ship's systems, dead before, powered up on their own. Consoles flashed not with his native language, but with strange symbols that he could suddenly read. The armor wasn't just fused to his body, it was inside his mind, feeding him knowledge, showing him fragments of a past that stretched beyond the rise and fall of stars. It told him of an enemy, not a race, not an army, but a force, one that did not conquer, but erased, not for gain, but for void. And the armor had been forged not to defeat that enemy, but to warn the galaxy when they returned. Because once before, the ancients had faced this darkness, and they had sealed it away. But now, the seal was breaking. 3 ships descended into Velar's orbit, sleek, black cruisers with no markings and no beacons. They came without hail, without diplomacy, without hesitation. They came for him. The armor didn't ask his permission. It activated the ship's defenses, overrode the control systems, and initiated an escape protocol. A hum filled the air, a vibration that grew until the ground cracked. Engines screamed to life with power far beyond their original capacity. And in a flash of light and gravity, the ship tore through space and vanished into hyperspace, leaving only the collapsed remains of a mountain and 3 confused cruisers behind. But the signal had already spread. Every major empire received it. The prophecy had begun to unfold. And for the first time in 100,000 years, old enemies began to speak again. Weapons long buried were unearthed. Ancient alliances reawakened. Fear returned. Because the armor had chosen. And the galaxy was no longer safe. Far beyond the lights of any civilized system, Jackson's ship emerged from hyperspace into the dark. No stars, no planetary bodies, no satellites, just empty space, a void so complete that even the sensors seemed hesitant to report anything at all. The armor within him pulsed gently, guiding his breath, steadying his nerves. He wasn't flying the ship. It was flying itself. The armor had taken full control, not out of malice, but necessity. And somewhere within that silver lattice wrapped around his skin, something ancient watched the stars with more memory than Jackson could comprehend. He had questions. Thousands. But the armor didn't answer in words. It showed him instead memories, or simulations, or perhaps something in between. Visions of great wars between light and nothingness, of civilizations that sang their histories across galaxies, only to fall silent in a single night. Creatures of shadow, neither alive nor dead, that devoured not just matter, but meaning, erasing worlds so thoroughly, even the memory of them vanished from the stars. The armor pulsed. A warning. A preparation. When the ship slowed, Jackson saw what the armor had brought him to. A planet, if it could be called that, drifting alone in the dark. Its orbit surrounded by debris, fractured hulls, dead satellites, scorched remnants of once proud stations. A graveyard. The armor whispered a name into his mind, Trinaxis. He landed gently. No lights welcomed him. No system scanned his approach. The world felt dead until he stepped out. Beneath his feet, the surface vibrated faintly, just enough to be felt, not heard. The ruins around him, though broken and silent, weren't forgotten. They watched. Statues half buried in ash bore the shapes of no species he recognized. Metal arches, uncorroded by time, hummed faintly when he passed beneath them. The armor guided his steps like a parent walking a child through sacred ground. Deep in the ruins, beneath crumbled stone and collapsed steel, he found a chamber sealed with runes. The moment his armored hand touched the door, it parted without resistance. Inside stood machines, silent sentinels, blinking softly to life as he entered. Murals lined the walls, tall figures in armor like his, 7 in total, each surrounded by swirling stars and monstrous silhouettes. In the center of the chamber floated an orb, pulsing like a heartbeat, casting beams of information so dense that Jackson's brain reeled. The armor filtered the data, slowed it down. And Jackson saw. 7 armors had been forged. Not by any known race, but by the ancient ones, beings that existed before linear time was a concept. Each armor had been bonded to a single warrior in a final stand against a force that moved between galaxies like a plague. Only 2 of the armors had survived the final war. One had been destroyed during the last strike. The others, hidden. Jackson's was the first to awaken. The implication was clear. The enemy had returned. And with it, the ancient seal was unraveling. Jackson staggered as the orb revealed more. Hidden networks, ancient failsafes, guardians who had watched from the shadows for eons. Not to fight, but to prevent. To ensure that no one found the armors again. And he had just triggered the galaxy's oldest security system. The armor fed him images, faces, names, coordinates. Leaders of systems he thought were allies. Empires that ruled with civility but built their thrones on the fear of what the armor represented. They would not help him. They would hunt him. He had become a variable the galaxy could not allow to exist. And as if on cue, the earth trembled. The temple shook. Ships. Not the enemy from ancient nightmares, but worse in a way. The present. Black cruisers hovered above the ruins, sleek and precise, their weapon systems already trained on the entrance. They came with silence. No warnings. No communications. They didn't intend to negotiate. The armor moved before Jackson could think, pulling energy from the ground, forming barriers of light and force. The blast struck, but none made it through. The ancient systems responded to him now. He raised his hand. Metal groaned. The earth beneath one cruiser cracked and lifted, bending the ship in half before slamming it into the ground with a seismic scream. The others turned to flee, but the armor surged with golden light, launching Jackson into the air like a bolt of thunder. He moved faster than the eye could track, cutting through ship hulls, ripping apart systems, disabling with precision and silence. When it was over, the sky was clear again. But Jackson didn't feel victorious. He felt watched. From beyond. From beneath the known galaxy. The armor whispered again. Others are coming. He returned to his ship, heart still racing. The armor felt different now, warmer. Proud. But also tense. There was more power to unlock. More secrets buried in his blood. As the ship lifted from the ruins, a new signal emerged, one the armor hadn't expected. Ancient. Encoded. Urgent. It contained coordinates, symbols, and a message. We have seen the first wave. The seal weakens. Find the second core before they do. And Jackson understood. The armor was one of 7. But to stop what was coming, he would need them all. The ship tore through subspace like a blade through silk, guided not by Jackson's hands but by instinct, his and the armor's, fused now in ways neither fully understood. He no longer felt like a passenger. He no longer felt like a man in control. He felt like a part of something ancient. The signal had led him to the edge of the known galaxy, past forgotten colonies, and into a sector listed as restricted by ancient treaty. No species was allowed to chart it. No empire dared patrol it. Legends claimed it was haunted by the echoes of wars too vast to remember, where fleets had vanished without trace and entire moons were found hollowed from the inside out. Jackson understood now those weren't stories. They were warnings. As the ship dropped from hyperspace, the first thing he saw was the wreckage. Debris fields the size of continents. Shattered megastructures. Craters still glowing from weapons fired tens of thousands of years ago. And at the center of it all, floating between a cracked dwarf star and a planetless orbit, was the second signal. A fortress, or what remained of one. The armor surged with recognition, its pulses faster, more insistent. This place wasn't just another ruin. It had once been a core, a command center for the ancients during the war that nearly ended everything. And somewhere inside it, the second piece waited. Another armor. Another key. He docked with what was left of a hangar bay, stepping carefully through corridors lit only by flickers of power, still humming after millennia of silence. Ghosts of systems stirred as he passed. Automated turrets long disabled, motion sensors too degraded to react. But something still lived here. He felt it. He followed the signal deeper, the armor adjusting automatically to the environmental decay. Radiation levels spiked. Oxygen dropped. Jackson barely noticed. The armor shielded his lungs, filtered the atmosphere, and hardened around him with each new threat. Then he found it. A chamber like the one on Velar. Only this time, it wasn't empty. Suspended midair in a sphere of humming light, another suit of armor hovered, sleeker than his, its lines sharper, its color darker, veined with red that pulsed like blood. But it was broken, cracked, and empty. The sphere flickered. The armor was no longer active. And nearby, beneath a collapsed console, Jackson saw something that made his stomach drop. Bones. Human. The armor hadn't just chosen once. It had chosen before. He moved closer, drawn to the lifeless suit, but as he stepped within the sphere's radius, a shockwave burst outward. The chamber screamed with energy. Walls glowed. Symbols flared. The armor locked his body in place, absorbing the shock, but not resisting. Because this was a test. And then, movement. The dead armor twitched. Cracks sealed. Lights flared red. But not toward Jackson. Toward something behind him. He turned, and found the air shimmering. And from it stepped a figure. Humanoid. Alive. But wrapped in shadows that didn't match its form. It wore no armor. No weapons. But it radiated the same presence as the void Jackson had seen in his visions. Ancient. Cold. Null. The figure spoke without sound, its words flowing into Jackson's mind like ice water. You awaken what should remain buried. Jackson stood firm, the armor growing warm around him in reply. You fear what is already here, he said. The figure tilted its head. Not fear. Recognition. And then it attacked. There was no warning. No signal. The chamber erupted in force. Walls buckled. Gravity failed. Jackson flew backward, the armor instantly responding, projecting shields, recalibrating momentum, shifting mass density in midair. The figure moved like liquid thought, ignoring the laws of matter, striking from angles that shouldn't exist. But Jackson had learned. He didn't fight with muscle. He fought with memory. He reached deep into the armor, letting it guide him, letting it fuse. Energy flared from his palms, golden arcs of plasma slicing through the storm. He countered each impossible movement with focus, matching the enemy's timelessness with the clarity of a moment. And then he touched it, only briefly, but it was enough. The shadow screamed, not in pain, but in fury, and retreated, its form unraveling, fleeing back into the void from which it came. The chamber fell silent again. The second armor, still lifeless, pulsed once more, then dimmed. The test was passed, but the warrior it had waited for was dead. Jackson stood over the remains of the previous bearer. A human, perhaps a distant ancestor, Perhaps not. The armor whispered. One survived. Not this one. Another. Hidden. Distant. Still waiting. And time was running out. The signal the figure had followed had been bait. A distraction. The real second armor had been moved. Jackson turned and ran. As he left the station, a storm erupted behind him. Subspace flaring with gravitational anomalies. The fortress collapsed into itself, consumed by whatever force had infected it. The last thing he saw was the dark armor vanishing into the light. Not destroyed. Taken. His ship accelerated, propelled by the armor's urgency. New coordinates. New target. This time, not a tomb, not a ruin. A city. Alive. Populated. And unaware of what was buried beneath it. The next phase had begun. And this time, he wasn't just the chosen. He was the last chance. The world of Solanar Prime was the crown jewel of the Nithran Accord, a thriving city world wrapped in rings of crystalline satellites and orbiting trade hubs. It was the kind of place where empires held their diplomatic summits, where warlords dined with bankers, and where secrets, no matter how ancient, went to sleep beneath luxury and neon. But beneath its glittering surface, beneath kilometers of steel foundations and city stacks, something stirred. Jackson arrived without clearance, slipping through the satellite grid under the armor's guidance. His ship adapted to civilian traffic signatures, weaving between liners and freight columns like it belonged there. No alarms sounded. No fighters scrambled. But the armor's pulse grew sharper with every kilometer. It remembered this place. More importantly, it remembered what was hidden below. The armor fed Jackson data, old schematics, lost access codes, geological heat maps revealing power signatures buried beneath the megastructures. A vault. Ancient. Locked. Unreachable by conventional means. But the armor was not conventional. He landed in the Undercity, among the poorest sectors, where security presence was low and infrastructure was ancient. Machines here still ran on combustion. Doors used mechanical locks. But graffiti covered everything. Murals of resistance. Faces of forgotten martyrs. The people didn't notice him, but the armor noticed them. Descendants of survivors. Faint traces of ancient bloodlines. The armor whispered fragments of their potential, sleeping, fragile, but there. They, too, were being watched. He moved quickly, descending into maintenance shafts guided by instinct and data. Lights flickered. Moisture clung to the walls. Down here, the city forgot itself. And at the very bottom, past a wall that wasn't a wall at all, but a disguised bulkhead with alien etchings, he found it. The vault. It pulsed faintly with the same energy as his armor. He placed his hand on it. The metal trembled, then opened. Inside was a chamber not of stone, but of light, illuminated by veins of gold embedded in obsidian walls, flowing like rivers. At the center stood a pedestal, and on it, a second armor. Intact. Dormant. Jackson stepped forward, heartbeat hammering. His armor flared with anticipation. The two armors resonated, a harmony that shook the chamber itself. Then he heard a voice. Not in his mind. In the room. Real. You're late. He spun. A figure stood at the entrance, a woman, tall and lean, clad in layered scavenger gear and bearing an expression that was half irritation, half disbelief. Her presence didn't register as a threat, but her aura. His armor reacted. The woman stepped into the chamber, her eyes fixed on the second armor. I've been tracking that signal since the Trinaxis burst, she said. Thought I was chasing some Empire relic. Didn't think I'd find one of you. Jackson narrowed his eyes. Who are you? She shrugged. Lyra. I used to work deep salvage. Then I found an artifact that started whispering to me in dreams. Brought me here. And now, you show up with that on you. She gestured to his armor. You're either the solution or the trigger that sets this all off. Before he could answer, the second armor moved. It didn't reach for Jackson. It reached for Lyra. A stream of light burst from the pedestal, wrapping around her like a slow tidal wave. She gasped, but didn't resist. And unlike his experience, hers wasn't smooth. The armor fodder tested her, until her scream echoed through the chamber. Then silence. And when the light faded, she stood taller. Armored. Awake. The armor had accepted her. 2 suits. 2 bearers. Before they could speak again, the chamber roared. Alarms that hadn't sounded in 10,000 years blared in a frequency that no modern sensor could detect, but the armor could. The vault was transmitting. Broadcasting across every secure channel in the system. Not a message. A challenge. Get us out of here, Lyra said. Already moving. Jackson didn't argue. As they emerged into the open air, explosions lit the skyline. Gunships descended. Squadrons of armored enforcers dropped from orbital stations. Solanar's government, whoever truly controlled it, had received the signal. And they were terrified. In the streets, civilians screamed. Sirens wailed. Walls shifted to lockdown mode. Entire districts sealed. But the armor didn't fear containment. It rewrote the rules. Jackson leapt, gravity folding beneath him. Lyra followed, her movements raw but powerful, her armor still calibrating to her. They crashed through blockades, shielded by energy fields the enforcers couldn't breach. Their ship rose from its hiding place, already transformed by the presence of two bearers, larger, faster, brighter. They didn't just escape Solinar. They ripped out of it. Behind them, the city spiraled into confusion, governments collapsing, resistance rising, ancient secrets pouring into the light. And across the galaxy, systems listened. 7 armors. 2 now active. The balance had begun to shift. But the enemy was not idle. In a system light years away, deep within the Eventide Nebula, a fleet of unnatural ships stirred from the void. Their hulls were not built, but grown. Their engines pulsed with the stolen echoes of dying suns. And at their center, a presence. Old, malevolent, awake. It had felt the second ignition, and it would not wait for the others. The hunt had begun. The stars twisted around them as their ship tore through hyperspace, engines burning with energy no human technology could replicate. Jackson sat in silence, his hands resting against the smooth, reactive metal of the control panel. The armor pulsed along his arms in rhythm with the ship's systems, man and machine no longer separate. Lyra stood across from him, arms crossed, helmet off. Her eyes were sharp, skeptical. The armor had accepted her, yes, but it had not explained itself. Not the way it had with Jackson. She wasn't bonded the same way. Not yet. You going to tell me what this is? She asked, breaking the silence. Jackson didn't look up. You felt it. When it fused to you. She scowled. I felt pain. Fire. 1,000 years of screams crammed into my skull. He finally met her gaze. That was memory. What the armor remembers. She hesitated. And you? I saw the end of galaxies, he said quietly. And something worse coming back to finish the job. The ship rumbled slightly, dropping from hyperspace without warning. The armor had made the decision, not them. Outside the viewport, a gray-blue gas giant loomed, its rings scattered with debris. One of its moons was covered in structures, but nothing moved. No ships. No lights. A dead world. But the armor pulsed with anticipation. The third was here. Jackson and Lyra descended in silence, their ship gliding low over jagged cliffs and broken cities. The moon had once been vibrant. They could see the remnants, domed cities, spires, collapsed ports. But now everything was dust. The armor whispered to them both, pointing toward a valley split by a chasm. There, embedded in the rock like a dagger plunged into flesh, was a tower. Or what remained of it. As they approached, Lyra's armor grew darker. Shadows pooled around her feet. What's wrong? Jackson asked. She shook her head. I don't know. It feels wrong. Like this place doesn't want us here. The tower's entrance loomed before them, half sealed by collapsed debris. They forced their way in, armored gauntlets tearing through metal as if it were cloth. The inside was hollow and cold. No lights. No power. But something waited. At the center of the structure, they found it. A chamber circular, marked by 7 pylons. One had been shattered. 2 were glowing softly. And in the center stood the third armor. But it was different. Not inert. Not waiting. It was already active. A figure stood in the center of the room, encased in obsidian black plating veined with violet light. Not a statue. Not a remnant. A man. Alive. His head turned slowly as they entered, his voice reverberating with something that did not belong to him. You're too late. Jackson stepped forward. Cautious. You're one of us. The figure laughed, low, humorless. I was. The lights in the chamber flickered. The armor on the man's body cracked in places, revealing pulsing green light beneath. Corruption. Jackson's armor tightened. Lyra's gauntlets flexed. The corruption wasn't just a defect, it was an infection. Something had reached him before they had. What happened to you? Lyra demanded. The man's eyes, what little of them remained, glowed. I heard the call. I followed the signals. The armor took me in. But something else came with it. He raised his hand, and the entire chamber shook. I saw what's coming. I saw what they buried. And I saw what we were built to become. Jackson took a step forward. You don't have to. I do, the man snarled. Because I finally understand. The ancients didn't build these armors to save the galaxy. They built them to replace it. We are the next wave. The reset. Jackson's blood went cold. The man's armor pulsed. The corruption spread. The chamber lit with arcs of black lightning. Join me, he said. We can remake everything. Jackson raised his hand, armor responding instantly. No. The corrupted bearer didn't hesitate. The fight exploded in a flash of power. He was faster than Jackson expected, his corrupted armor enhancing his speed and strength, warping the space around him. Jackson blocked the first strike, barely. Lyra launched into the fray, her blows ringing like thunder as their armors clashed. The chamber became a storm. Stone cracked. Symbols flared. The pylons collapsed one by one. Jackson drew on the core of his armor, letting it flood him with ancient battle patterns, movements and counters, tactics from a war that predated memory. He moved with the precision of a being who had fought for 1,000 years. Lyra followed suit, her movements wild but powerful, her instincts raw but guided by the armor's rhythm. Together, they overwhelmed the corrupted bearer. He fell to his knees, sparks flying from his fractured core. His voice was weak now, broken. I saw it. What? Jackson asked. The true enemy, it doesn't come to fight. It comes to rewrite. It'll turn us into echoes. Code without memory. Then he convulsed. The armor around him shrieked, and in a burst of dark light, it shattered, collapsing into dust. And from that dust, a fragment remained. A core. The third key. But something else remained too. A whisper in Jackson's mind. Not from the armor. From something else. It said only 2 words. We see. He took the core. The chamber collapsed behind them. And as they ascended into orbit once more, the stars above shifted. Not visibly, but perceptibly. Lyra looked at him, voice steady. How many more? 4, Jackson said. And the next. The armor answered for him, by showing him a vision. A city beneath the ice. A war already in motion. A resistance on the edge of extinction. And a bearer who didn't want to be found. Their next destination lay buried beneath the frozen crust of Varellon, a planet locked in perpetual twilight, its surface sheathed in kilometers of ice, cracked only by geothermal fissures that exhaled light and steam into the endless dark. No star warmed Varellon. It orbited a neutron remnant, its only heat rising from beneath. Life had survived there not by thriving, but by hiding, and dying quietly. The armor guided them to a glacial crevasse half a continent wide. Inside, tucked between jagged cliffs of blue crystal and ice centuries thick, was a signal faint, erratic, shielded beneath layers of interference. But the armor knew it. It had been waiting for it. Lyra adjusted her armor as the ship descended. You're sure this is where we'll find the next one? Jackson nodded slowly. I'm not sure of anything. The armor is. She didn't argue. They had both felt the echo something down there was active. But unlike before, it wasn't a beacon or a pulse of energy. It was a cry. Help me. They dropped into the crevasse in silence, landing on a ledge barely wide enough for the ship's undercarriage. Snow blew sideways in relentless gusts. Beneath them, ice groaned with every step. The armor absorbed the cold without comment. Jackson barely noticed the temperature. They found the entrance behind a curtain of frozen gas, molecular steam flash-frozen midair into a shimmering veil. It parted at their touch, revealing a staircase carved into the ice, descending in tight spirals far deeper than natural heat should have allowed. And then, warmth. As they reached the bottom, the frost faded, replaced by smooth black walls humming with dormant energy. Lights flickered as they passed, ancient systems stirred. Another vault. But different. No pedestal. No armor. Just silence. And a figure slumped against the far wall, unmoving. Jackson approached slowly. It was a woman, older than him, human, her face drawn and pale. She wore no armor, just the remnants of a flight suit long since shredded. But her hand still clutched a gauntlet, severed, broken, and still glowing. Lyra knelt beside her and placed 2 fingers to the woman's neck. She's alive. Barely. Jackson touched the gauntlet, and the world changed. Suddenly, he was somewhere else. Not physically. Not completely. A memory? No, a transference. He saw through the woman's eyes, years of running, hiding, screaming in silence as creatures born of static and entropy chased her through collapsing corridors and frozen mazes. She had once worn the 4th armor, but it had failed. Not because of her. Because something had broken it. Something inside her mind. And now she was the last survivor of a colony that never existed in the records. When the vision ended, Jackson stumbled back. She's been hunted since the first ignition, he said. They found her before we did. Lyra looked around. So where's the armor? Before Jackson could answer, the ice cracked. The wall beside them exploded inward, and with it came the enemy. Not ships. Not soldiers. Shadows. Creatures born of silence, shaped like men but empty, their skin shimmering like broken mirrors, their movements glitching with unnatural sharpness. The same kind Jackson had only seen in vision before now stood before him, real, tangible, and hungry. The armor moved without command. Jackson's arms lit with sigils. Lyra's armor locked around her chest, building plates like waves of steel. The air thickened. The walls trembled. Then they struck. The first creature lunged at Lyra, its claws scraping her shoulder as she twisted to avoid the blow. She retaliated with a plasma burst that turned its chest into steam, but it didn't fall. It reformed midair, limbs stitching back with data light. Jackson leapt forward, slamming a boot into another's chest. It collapsed into fragments, code and ash, but reconstituted instantly. He gritted his teeth. We can't kill them, he said. Lyra shouted back. Then what do we do? The armor pulsed. A solution. The gauntlet. Jackson turned toward the unconscious woman and slammed his hand onto the shattered gauntlet still fused to her fingers. It responded instantly. A column of white light exploded from the vault floor. The creatures screamed, shattering in midair like glass thrown through fire. Their forms broke apart and did not return. The energy pulsed once more, then faded. The woman stirred. Her eyes opened. And when she looked at Jackson, she whispered, "You finally came." Her name was Elin Dre, and she had been waiting for the others for over a decade. As they lifted her out of the vault, carrying her between them, the remnants of the fourth armor began to regrow, pulling from the gauntlet, from the chamber walls, from Elin herself. It wasn't gone. It had just been hiding. Like her. In orbit, as the ship broke free of Varellan's icy grip, Jackson stared at the fourth armor, still incomplete, still damaged, but alive. And for the first time, the armor spoke directly to him, without filter. The enemy adapts. They no longer wait for awakening. They hunt it. They devour it. We must move faster. Jackson looked to Lyra, then to Elin, resting in the med bay. They weren't 7 armors anymore. They were 4 bearers. And soon, they'd need all their strength. Because as the stars shifted once again, the armor showed them the next location. Not a ruin. Not a grave. A fortress. Still standing. Still guarded. Still deadly. And it belonged to a species that had never forgiven humanity for existing. The fortress world of Jarnus hung like a dagger above a red dwarf, its orbit locked and angled for maximum tactical oversight across 6 surrounding systems. It was not a homeworld. It was a declaration. Every inch of its surface had been carved into armor. Defensive spires stabbed into the atmosphere. Planetary shields shimmered with enough force to shear dreadnoughts in half. Orbital cannons hung like gods watching the void, and beneath them, the entire population existed in perpetual readiness. The Jarnasi didn't build monuments. They built warnings. And now, the 5th armor waited somewhere within that steel tomb, buried deep beneath a fortress designed to repel anything short of a supernova. Worse, the Jarnasi knew. The armor's pulse had reached them. They didn't worship it. They didn't fear it. They hated it. Lyra watched the readouts flicker on their approach. No way we land there. They'll fire before we break low orbit. Jackson didn't argue. His armor hummed like it agreed. Not with retreat, but with caution. Elin sat nearby, recovering quickly. The 4th armor was slowly rebuilding itself around her, metal tendrils stretching along her arms and legs like veins of silver lightning. She winced as another plate clicked into place across her ribs. "Let me go," she said, her voice ragged. "I'll draw them off." "No," Jackson said flatly. "You're not ready. I've been hunted for 10 years. I'm always ready." "Not for this," he said. "You don't just walk into a planet where everything with a pulse has trained to kill anything tied to the armors." She clenched her fists, but said nothing. Jackson turned to Lyra. "They won't expect a breach from below." She blinked. "You mean land under their shield grid?" He nodded. "We go through the crust. Drill straight into the under catacombs. Every Jarnasi city has them, deep structural support zones tied to their planet spine power core. If the armor's still dormant, that's where it is." Lyra whistled. "You're insane." Jackson activated the armor's internal schematics. A visual map projected from his gauntlet, overlaying a potential descent path that bypassed surface defenses by millimeters. "Insane," Lyra muttered again, but not wrong. The ship dropped out of stealth mode on the far side of the dwarf star, skimming plasma currents to hide its heat signature. Jackson took the controls manually. Even the armor didn't trust auto-NAV this close. They burned atmosphere in reverse, slicing through Jarnus' upper crust using a drill burst enhanced by the armor's energy conversion systems. A kilometer below the surface, they struck metal, ancient foundations, load-bearing slabs the size of battlecruisers. The armor reacted first. "It's close." They emerged into a hollow chamber lit by flickering red security lights, siren tones pulsing through the concrete like a heartbeat. Dust fell from high vaults. Echoes rippled down corridors left untouched for centuries. This wasn't a basement. It was a prison. Jackson led the way, his armor shimmering faintly. Each step seemed to awaken the structure, activating forgotten systems. Symbols carved into the walls lit up, matching the armor's pulse. Somewhere nearby, the 5th core stirred. They found it suspended above a pit, held in a magnetic stasis field that shimmered with barely restrained violence. It was the smallest armor yet, sleek, almost fragile, like a shell of glass woven with golden filaments. But it radiated power like a star, compressed and waiting to detonate. And it wasn't alone. Jarnasi enforcers dropped into the chamber from hidden recesses, dozens of them, their bodies wrapped in exosuits built for war, each one a living weapon. Lyra and Elin reacted instantly, moving to shield the core. Jackson stepped forward, slowly raising his hands. "I'm not here to fight." The Jarnasi commander stepped forward, his face hidden beneath an obsidian helm carved with ancient runes. "You were already fighting," he said. "The moment you brought the 5th one to awareness." "I didn't," Jackson said. "It called to me." The commander tilted his head. "Lies." He raised a gauntlet fist. The armor around Jackson exploded outward, forming a barrier of kinetic force just as the first blast hit. The room erupted. Energy bolts filled the air. Lyra spun into the fray, striking with surgical precision. Elin's armor, now half-formed, surged with reactive shielding, deflecting a trio of attackers before she brought a fist down on one's helmet, crushing it into sparks. Jackson moved through the chaos. Not to fight, to reach. He dove toward the stasis field, extending his arm. The fifth armor reacted. The stasis collapsed. The core pulsed. And in a flash of light and gravity, the armor launched toward its chosen bearer. Not Jackson. Not Lyra. Not Elin. One of the Jarnasi soldiers froze mid-strike. The armor wrapped around her. She screamed, then rose. The other Jarnasi fell back in confusion. The commander shouted, but it was too late. The fifth had chosen, and the one who wore it looked at Jackson with wide, terrified eyes. I don't know why, she whispered. But the armor did. And so did he. You don't have to know, he said. You just have to stand. Then the ceiling caved in. Reinforcements. Too many. The chamber shook as a full battalion dropped from the upper catacombs. They couldn't win this fight. Not now. The armor made the decision. Jackson activated the warp core. A sphere of light engulfed the team and the new bearer. The last thing the Jarnasi saw was a golden explosion tearing a hole through space itself. And then they were gone. Back aboard the ship, the fifth sat in silence. Helmet retracted, skin pale. Her name was Kane. She had been born for war, raised in hate. Now she was bonded to what her people considered a cosmic abomination. But she hadn't rejected it. And it hadn't rejected her. Jackson nodded to her. You're one of us now. Outside, the stars twisted. And the armor showed them the next path. 6 had awakened. Only 1 remained. But the 7th wasn't waiting. It was moving. And it wasn't looking for a bearer. It was looking for revenge. ChatGPT Skazal. The final signal came not from a tomb, a city, or a vault. It came from deep space, from a place that by all logic should not have existed. The Dead Belt. A region of collapsed matter, gravitational scars, and swirling antimatter storms where even light hesitated to travel. No ships went there. No beacons reached it. It was known only through ancient warnings, star maps that cut holes in their routes as if the belt itself was a wound the galaxy refused to remember. And yet, the 7th armor was moving through it. Not hidden, not waiting, hunting. The armor on Jackson's body vibrated with tension the moment they crossed into the belt. Not fear, not resistance, grief. It remembered this place. The others felt it too. Lyra stood silent on the deck, hands clenched. Elin knelt near Kane, showing her how to synchronize her armor's neural interface. Kane was adapting faster than anyone expected. Born for war, yes, but now shaped by something else. But none of them spoke as the stars around them grew faint. The ship's systems dimmed. Not from malfunction, from submission. The deeper they moved into the belt, the more the armor took control. It was flying itself, along a path that had been burned into memory so ancient, even the galaxy's oldest AI couldn't recall it. And then they saw it. Not a planet, not a station. A structure, floating alone. Black, angular, rotating slowly with the silence of something that had waited too long. A forge. The first forge, where the 7 were made. But it was broken. The outer rings had shattered into spirals of debris. Plasma vents wept dying sparks. Whatever light it once held had been consumed long ago. But something still moved inside. Something armored. Jackson's pulse quickened. He opened the channel. Who are you? The response came not in sound, but in memory. A burst of pain. An explosion. 7 warriors standing against the abyss. 1 falling. The 6th fell in battle. But the 7th fell by choice. Not corrupted. Twisted. The figure emerged from the forge. Its armor was obsidian black, etched with burning crimson veins. Not infected like the corrupted bearer they'd fought before, but reforged. This wasn't an enemy that had inherited a suit. This was a bearer who had betrayed the others. You took too long, the figure said, voice mechanical and cold. Who are you? Jackson asked again, though he already knew. The figure removed its helmet. A human face. Young, sharp, but hollow. I was chosen, the 7th said. Before you. Before them. He pointed at the others. I was the first. Lyra stepped forward. Then why did you fall? The 7th's gaze turned to her. Because I saw the truth. We weren't made to protect. We were made to delay. The enemy can't be destroyed. Only postponed. Our war was always lost. Kane's fists clenched. That doesn't mean we stop fighting. The 7th tilted his head. No. It means we stop pretending. Join me, and we'll build something honest. Not hope. Dominance. Let the enemy come. Let them see what we've become. Elin shook her head. You're insane. No, Jackson said. He's afraid. The 7th flinched. Jackson stepped forward, his armor flaring gold. You think the fight is meaningless. But here we are 6 of us. Chosen. Alive. Together. We don't need you, the 7th said. You do, Jackson said. We all do. That's why the armors were made. Not to fight alone, but to unify. The forge trembled. The seventh's armor burned brighter. So be it. He launched. The impact shattered the air. Jackson met him in mid-strike, blow for blow, energy arcing between them like solar flares. The others joined in, Lyra flanking, Kane intercepting bursts of fire, Elend shielding them with force walls conjured from memory and will. The battle wasn't choreography. It was clash. The seventh fought like a dying god, flawless, merciless, relentless. But Jackson fought with unity. Their armors began to resonate. Not separately. Together. The others felt it. Sync points activating, systems combining, armor interfaces fusing into a lattice of shared thought and reflex. 7 armors were not designed to be separate weapons. They were parts of a whole. And now, with the 6th and 7th present, the system reached critical activation. Their armor cores aligned. The forge responded. Beams of white light erupted from its shattered hull, stitching the battlefield with memory and power. The 7th faltered. His armor cracked. Jackson stepped forward, light radiating from his chest. It's not too late. The 7th dropped to one knee. The others surrounded him, not to destroy, to offer. And for one breathless moment, the forge held them all in its grasp. The armors lit as one, and the galaxy shifted. Far beyond the forge, in the darkest reaches where the true enemy waited, something felt the activation. Not as a threat, but as a challenge. And it answered. The message arrived without sound, light, or signal. No ship carried it. No code encoded it. It simply appeared, across systems, screens, and minds. A thought, spoken in silence. We are awake. The enemy was no longer a shadow. It had seen the 7 united. And it was coming. From beyond mapped space, beyond dark matter seas and collapsed timelines, a tide began to rise. Ships, but not ships. Shapes that defied symmetry. Weapons that didn't fire beams or bullets but possibilities, shredding the concept of cause and effect wherever they passed. Entire stations vanished. Not destroyed. Forgotten. Wiped from memory. From records. From time itself. The first to fall was Carion Station, home to 3 million souls. The last recorded transmission was nothing but a single line of ancient text. Unmake begins. Back aboard the forge, the bearers stood in silence. The 7th, now healed, now whole, sat beside the forge's central interface. He had not spoken since the battle, but his armor now pulsed in harmony with the rest. He was no longer broken, just burdened. Jackson watched the stars, arms crossed over golden chest plates. It's starting. Kane nodded. Then we hit them first. Elend glanced at her. You don't hit a tidal wave. You ride above it. Or drown. We don't drown, Lyra growled. The forge responded to their collective will, systems long dormant flaring back online. Massive conduits lit up like arteries. Warp fields snapped into alignment. And the starless void began to shimmer with something new. A gate. Not a wormhole. A mirror. Crafted not of metal, but of memory, drawn from the combined energy of the 7 armors. It reflected nothing. Instead, it absorbed the past. Their past. Every battle. Every loss. Every name they carried. The Forge AI, now awake, spoke for the first time. Point of origin located. 0 barrier breach in 21 cycles. Offensive capability limited. Survival probability minimal. Lyra grinned. Good odds. Jackson stepped forward. We opened the gate. Kane frowned. To where? Elend answered softly. To the place where it began. The mirror expanded, revealing a region of space even the ancients had sealed away. No stars. No coordinates. Just entropy, pulsing in waves. The place the enemy had been locked in. Now it had clawed its way out. But the 7 would not wait for the storm. They would meet it. Inside the ship, the bearers took position, each armor fusing further with their host. Their nervous systems synced, thoughts partially shared, reflexes amplified into combat symphony. For the first time, Jackson felt all of them at once. Their fear. Their fire. Their purpose. They crossed the gate. And the universe changed. On the other side, reality twisted. Laws of physics frayed at the edges. Their ship groaned until the armors stabilized it, creating a protective field shaped not by science, but by memory. A pocket of sanity amid chaos. Then they saw it. The enemy's heart. A mass, pulsing, shifting, formed from the remains of forgotten civilizations. Debris shaped like buildings. Bones shaped like fleets. Voices repeating their own ends on loop. The bearers didn't hesitate. They launched. The battle wasn't just spatial. It was temporal. Attacks occurred before they were thought. Defenses failed before they were activated. Each move unraveled possibility itself. But the armors were built for this. They did not fight with the timeline. They anchored it. Jackson slammed through waves of null ships, his golden armor fracturing them into data storms. Lyra weaved between collapsing time folds, striking with precision that defied probability. Elend unleashed bursts of harmonic resonance, disrupting the enemy's reality-shredding fields. Kane led the charge against the core itself, diving headfirst into the storm with a war cry that cut across dimensions. In the seventh, he did not fight. He absorbed. His armor expanded, pulling in the enemy's own temporal feedback, converting chaos into order. His betrayal had taught him their rhythm. Now he silenced it. The core cracked. Light, true light, poured through the wound. But the enemy wasn't done. It shifted, adapted, became singular. A figure emerged. Not like the shadows before. This one was focused. One will, one mind, one hatred. It spoke in all their voices, all at once. You are fragments. We are whole. Jackson stepped forward. No, we are many, and we remember. They struck together. The collision wasn't physical. It was final. The memory of their union rewrote the moment. The enemy screamed, not in defeat, but in rejection. And then, silence. The kind that doesn't just follow a battle. The kind that means it is over. The bearers floated in place. Wounded, exhausted, alive. The core collapsed. And in its place, a star. The forge's last function activated. It sealed the region. Not with force. With truth. What had happened here would be remembered. Forever. Jackson turned to the others. It's done. No, Elon said. It's begun. They returned to a galaxy that felt different. Not visibly, not in the architecture of planets or the alignment of stars, but in the air. In the way people looked to the sky, as if knowing something vast had just passed overhead. A storm they hadn't seen, but somehow survived. News traveled fast. No broadcast was ever sent from the forge. No report published, no statement signed. And yet, across every system, every language, every species, a whisper rose like wind between ruins. They stopped it. The seven. The bearers. Not warriors from thrones or fleets, not emissaries of governments or gods, but echoes of something older. The legacy of those who once dared to remember when everyone else had chosen to forget. And now, the galaxy remembered too. The bearers did not return as conquerors. They split. Jackson stepped off the ship alone, onto Earth soil scorched by ages but still breathing beneath ash and memory. Cities had changed. Languages had evolved. But he saw familiar eyes among strangers. People who would endure. Lyra vanished into the outer rim, a spectral guardian watching the trade routes that once trafficked war. She trained small militias, not with weapons, but with awareness. How to spot the silence before it became a scream. Elin went to the core worlds, her partially rebuilt armor a constant reminder that healing was ongoing. She didn't lead. She taught. In whisper markets and underworld clinics, she helped the forgotten become remembered again. Cain returned to Jarnus, not to reclaim it, but to show them the truth. She stood on the same battlements where she once trained to kill anything not of her blood, now defending those she once feared. Her armor bore the symbols of both Earth and Jarnus, two paths made one. The seventh? No one knew. He disappeared beyond mapped space, chasing the remnants of what had almost unmade them. He became a myth, some said a hunter, others a shadow, still wearing the armor that once broke his mind and rebuilt it stronger. And the armors? They remained fused to their hosts, not as prison, nor curse, nor uniform, but as memory. They didn't speak unless spoken to. They didn't fight unless called upon. But they were always there, watching, ready. Because even though the great enemy had been defeated, the lesson remained. The forge had not created weapons. It had created witnesses. And witnesses endure. Years passed. Some civilizations rose. Others fractured. But through it all, a new council was formed, not of governments, but of remembrance. Known simply as the Circle, it had no throne, no command center, just a single room, and 7 empty chairs. Once a cycle, the bearers, or those they chose, would return, not to dictate, but to listen, to hear the stories of others, to protect not by force, but by ensuring truth had a voice. On the edge of a quiet moon, a child sat by a fire, her eyes scanning the stars. Did they really stop the end? She asked. Her father, a mechanic with hands stained by a life of labor, smiled softly. They didn't stop it, he said. They stood in front of it and made the galaxy remember what it means to try. The child looked up again, searching. Above her, among constellations old and new, 7 lights blinked in silent orbit, just for a moment, before vanishing into the dark. And somewhere in that darkness, a single phrase echoed back across the stars. We do not forget. We do not forgive easily. But we always return.